Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the gilded, yet utterly miserable, world of a king's guard in Joseon, Korea. Forget the fancy robes and the serene palace gardens you see in dramas. Your life, should you have been one of these guards, would have been a relentless cycle of discomfort, danger, and thankless duty. Imagine trading your cozy bed for a drafty guard post, your warm food for meager rations, and your peaceful nights for constant vigilance, all while dressed in a uniform that's more burden than protection. It's a job so demanding, so utterly devoid of modern comforts. You'd probably call in sick on day one, if sick days even existed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, drop a comment with where you are and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at Hanyang, the grand capital of Joseon, your heart thrumming with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The bustling streets, the scent of kimchi and charcoal, the distant murmur of the city. It's all a dizzying contrast to your humble village life. You've come here, drawn by the promise of honor, stability, and perhaps even a meager rise in status that comes with serving the king. You envision yourself standing tall, a sword at your hip, guarding the very personification of the realm. You imagine the respect, the sense of purpose, the quiet dignity of a man entrusted with the safety of a nation. But the moment you pass through the imposing Donhwaman Gate and step onto the vast, open grounds of the Changdeogung Palace, a different reality begins to seep into your bones. The sheer scale of the palace complex is overwhelming, a labyrinth of buildings, courtyards, and hidden paths that seems to swallow the very air. This isn't just a grand residence, it's a living, breathing entity, with its own rhythm and its own harsh demands. The air, though seemingly still, feels thick with unspoken rules, unseen eyes, and the quiet hum of constant vigilance. The promise of honor begins to feel heavy, like the coarse fabric of the uniform you are soon to inherit. Your initial training is a rude awakening. Forget the romanticized swordplay. You spend endless hours in monotonous drills, practicing formations, learning the precise etiquette of bowing, standing, and saluting. Your body aches from holding rigid postures for what feels like an eternity. Your eyes burn from staring straight ahead, forbidden to wander even for a moment. You learn that your individual prowess matters less than your ability to function as an unthinking, unfeeling cog in a vast machine. Your life is no longer your own. It belongs to the palace, to the king, and to the endless, unyielding requirements of security. The palace walls, you quickly realize, are not just physical barriers. They are psychological ones. Once inside, the outside world shrinks, becoming a distant memory. Your family, your village, your former life, they fade into a hazy dream. Your world is now confined to these sprawling grounds, a gilded cage where every movement is scrutinized, every word potentially overheard, and every moment dedicated to the king's safety. The grandeur you once admired now feels oppressive, a constant reminder of the immense power you are meant to protect, and the insignificance of your own existence within its shadow. You're quickly introduced to the brutal hierarchy. You are a mere guard, a nameless face among hundreds, easily replaceable. Your superiors, hardened by years of similar servitude, often view you with a mixture of indifference and mild contempt. They bark orders, demand perfection, and dole out punishments with chilling efficiency. There's no room for error, no space for individuality. Your goal is simply to blend in, to perform your duties flawlessly, and to avoid drawing any negative attention whatsoever. Honor, you realize, is not something given freely here. It is a precarious state, constantly threatened by missteps and the ever-present possibility of displeasing those above you. One common misconception is that all Joseon palace guards were highly trained martial artists. While some specialized units certainly were, the vast majority of guards, especially those on routine patrol and sentry duty, focused more on discipline, obedience, and endurance than on intricate combat skills. Their primary role was presence and vigilance, acting as a deterrent rather than engaging in frequent heroic battles. The daily grind for most was far less about thrilling sword fights and more about standing still for hours on end, exposed to the elements. An interesting, though often overlooked, detail of a Joseon king's guard's life was the strict rotational schedule that often led to severe sleep deprivation. Guards were usually assigned to posts for specific, often long, shifts e.g., 2 to 4 hours, followed by short rest periods, only to be back on duty within a few hours. This irregular sleep pattern, especially for night shifts, meant that true, uninterrupted rest was a rare luxury. Imagine constantly being on edge, your body struggling to find a rhythm, and your mind perpetually tired, all while needing to maintain peak alertness for the king's safety. It was a subtle, yet pervasive, form of misery that gnawed at your well-being. Historians still debate the true effectiveness of the vast numbers of guards employed in the Joseon palace system. Was the sheer quantity of personnel a genuinely effective deterrent against internal plots and external threats? Or was it also a means of projecting power and maintaining a vast, controlled workforce? Some scholars argue that the density of guards created an almost impenetrable security net. Others suggest that the system, while imposing, was perhaps less efficient than it appeared, sometimes hampered by internal politicking and the challenges of managing such a large, often bored, workforce. The balance between security theater and genuine threat mitigation remains a point of academic discussion. The weight of your uniform feels oppressive. Even on a cool day, it's made of thick, often coarse fabric, designed for durability and presence, not comfort. The helmet, while ceremonial and protective, adds to the burden, pressing down on your head, limiting your peripheral vision. Your weapons, a heavy sword and sometimes a bow and quiver, are extensions of your duty, but also constant reminders of the physical demands placed upon you. There's no respite, no moment to truly relax. Even when off duty, the constant physical exertion, the mental strain of perpetual alertness, and the oppressive atmosphere of the palace begin to chip away at your initial optimism. You quickly learn that life as a king's guard isn't about grand gestures or heroic acts. It's about enduring the mundane, the uncomfortable, and the relentless pressure of being a living shield. The honor you sought now feels like a heavy cloak, binding you to a life of misery. You are but a silent sentinel, a cog in a vast machine, your individual desires and comforts sacrificed at the altar of royal security. And as the sun sets on your first few days, casting long shadows across the palace grounds, you realize that your life here will be an endless vigil, where the only certainty is the grinding, miserable routine. The sun rises, casting long, pale shadows across the palace grounds, and with it, your day of monotonous drudgery begins anew. This isn't the kind of military life filled with grand maneuvers or heroic charges. This is a relentless, soul-crushing cycle of routine, punctuated only by moments of acute discomfort and the constant, underlying hum of anxiety. Your morning starts with the ritualistic change of the guard, a precise dance of movements and positions that must be executed flawlessly. You stand at your assigned post, a silent, unmoving sentinel, often for hours at a time. Your eyes must remain fixed, your posture rigid, your breath controlled. Every muscle aches, especially in your back and legs. From the sustained tension, your mind, however, is the real battleground. It desperately seeks distraction, longing to drift. But you must fight that urge, forcing it to remain alert, ever vigilant. The smallest flicker of your gaze, the slightest slump of your shoulders, could invite the wrath of a superior or, worse, be interpreted as a lapse in loyalty. After your shift, there's no leisurely breakfast. Your meal is typically a bowl of barley or millet porridge, perhaps with a few meager side dishes of pickled vegetables. It's bland, repetitive, and designed purely for sustenance, not enjoyment. You eat quickly, often standing or hunched in a crowded common area, the silence broken only by the slurp of spoons and the occasional gruff command from a senior guard. There's no time for savoring, no opportunity for conversation. This isn't just about efficiency, it's another layer of discipline, teaching you to detach from even the most basic of human pleasures. The midday brings more drills and inspections. You march in formation, practice your limited sword forms, and endure meticulous scrutiny of your uniform and equipment. Every crease, every speck of dust, every dull edge on your blade is noted. Perfection is the only acceptable standard. If your uniform is not immaculate, if your movements are even slightly out of sync, you face immediate punishment. This could range from extra duties, physical exercises like repeated squats or push-ups, or even a public lashing with a bamboo stick. The fear of these consequences is a constant motivator, driving you to meticulous, almost obsessive, attention to detail. Your shifts are not confined to a single comfortable post. You patrol vast stretches of the palace complex, often walking for miles over the course of a day. The ground beneath your heavy boots changes from smooth stone courtyards to rough, unpaved paths, to grassy areas that become muddy quagmires after rain. You ascend countless stairs, navigate confusing corridors, and skirt around hidden gardens, always maintaining your watchful demeanor. This constant movement, coupled with the weight of your uniform and equipment, taxes your body relentlessly. One common, yet often unstated aspect of a guard's daily life was the silent competition and distrust among peers. While camaraderie could form, there was also an underlying tension. Guards were often encouraged, implicitly or explicitly, to report on their fellow guards for any infractions, no matter how minor. This created an atmosphere where true trust was a luxury, and suspicion was a necessary survival tool. Imagine constantly watching your back, even among those who share your miserable existence, knowing that a misstep you make could be eagerly reported by someone looking to curry favor or simply avoid punishment themselves. It's a lonely way to live. An interesting, perhaps less known, fact is that a guard's daily water intake was often implicitly restricted, especially during long shifts. You couldn't just wander off for a drink whenever you felt thirsty. Water was typically available only during designated breaks, which were few and far between. This meant enduring hours of thirst, particularly during the humid Joseon summers. As a matter of course, it added another layer of physical discomfort and tested your endurance in a very fundamental way, forcing your body to adapt to prolonged periods of dehydration while maintaining peak alertness. Historians still debate the psychological toll this monotonous, high-pressure environment took on the ordinary Joseon king's guard. Did the constant vigilance and lack of personal freedom lead to widespread mental health issues? Or did the rigid structure and sense of duty provide a form of stability for those who endured it? Some scholars argue that the extreme discipline might have fostered a kind of stoic resilience. Others suggest that the lack of agency and the pervasive fear of punishment likely created a suppressed population prone to quiet despair or outbursts when the pressure became too great. The long-term mental impact of such a life remains a nuanced area of academic discussion. As evening falls, your duties do not cease. Night shifts are particularly grueling. The palace becomes a place of shadows and eerie silence, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl or the whisper of the wind through the eaves. Your senses are heightened, every creak and rustle magnified into a potential threat. The cold permeates your uniform, seeping into your bones, and sleep becomes a distant, tantalizing dream. You patrol dark corridors, stand guard by the king's private quarters, and listen for any sound that might indicate danger. The weight of the king's life, and by extension, the fate of the nation, rests on your shoulders, making every shadow a suspect, every silence pregnant with possibility. And even when your shift finally ends, true rest is elusive. You might snatch a few hours of sleep in a cramped, unheated bunkhouse, surrounded by the snores and restless movements of your fellow guards. The constant noise, the cold, the lingering tension from your duties, it all conspires to keep you from deep slumber. You wake feeling more tired than when you lay down, knowing that in just a few short hours, the sun will rise again, and the miserable cycle will begin anew. This is your life, a relentless treadmill of duty, discomfort, and the ever-present shadow of the king's precarious safety. As the days bleed into weeks and weeks into months, you come to understand that your uniform isn't just a symbol of your duty. It's a constant source of misery, a heavy, ill-fitting burden that conspires with the elements to make your life a living hell. The weather in Joseon, you quickly discover, is a cruel master, and your attire offers little sanctuary. In the blistering summers, the heat is a suffocating blanket. Your uniform, typically made of thick, woven cotton or hemp, designed for durability and a semblance of formality, offers no breathability. Imagine standing guard for hours in the direct sun, the heavy fabric clinging to your skin, absorbing every drop of sweat until it feels like a damp, suffocating second skin. The sun beats down on your head, even through your helmet or hat, cooking your brain slowly. Dehydration becomes a constant threat. Your throat parched, your lips cracked, and your vision blurring at the edges. There's no air conditioning, no refreshing breeze in the palace courtyards. Only the relentless, oppressive heat that saps your strength with every passing minute. You learn to breathe shallowly, to conserve every ounce of energy, and to dream of the elusive shade of a distant tree. Then comes the rainy season, often a deluge of monsoons that turn the palace grounds into a muddy, slippery quagmire. Your uniform, once a hot burden, now becomes a sodden, heavy cloak. The thick fabric quickly becomes waterlogged, weighing you down, making every step a struggle. The chill seeps into your bones, and despite the summer heat, you find yourself shivering uncontrollably. Your leather boots, meant for protection, quickly become squelchy, uncomfortable prisons, chafing your feet and inviting blisters and skin infections. There's little respite. Even if you're lucky enough to be under a small eaves, the dampness pervades everything, and the persistent drumming of the rain makes hearing any suspicious sounds a near impossibility. You're soaked to the bone, chilled to the marrow, and still expected to maintain perfect vigilance. The winters are arguably the most brutal. Joseon winters are infamous for their biting cold, with temperatures often plummeting well below freezing, accompanied by harsh winds that whip across the exposed palace grounds. Your uniform, though thick, offers woefully inadequate insulation against such extremes. Layers are minimal, and the cold penetrates through the coarse fabric, numbing your fingers and toes, stiffening your joints. Imagine standing motionless at your post, the snow falling relentlessly, encasing you in a layer of icy crystals. Your breath mists in the air, your nose runs, and your lips turn blue. The heavy boots, while somewhat protective against snow, become rigid with ice, making every movement painful. Frostbite is a real danger, not a distant concept, and you constantly rub your extremities, trying to coax some circulation back into them, all while maintaining that unyielding, expressionless guard. Your headwear, whether it's a formal helmet or a simple cap, offers little comfort. In summer, it traps heat. In winter, it struggles to keep your head warm against the biting wind. The constant pressure on your head can lead to headaches, adding another layer to your perpetual discomfort. Your ears, exposed to the elements, ache from the cold or hum with the persistent noise of the wind. Even your eyes suffer, constantly exposed to glaring sun, blinding snow, or driving rain, forcing you to squint, which only adds to the strain. One common yet often overlooked fact about Joseon military uniforms is that they were primarily designed for symbolism and intimidation, rather than practical comfort or even optimal combat utility in all weather conditions. The grandeur and imposing appearance were paramount for conveying the authority of the king and the state. This meant sacrifices in breathability, insulation, and overall ease of movement, making the uniform a heavy burden for the common soldier or guard who had to wear it day in and day out, regardless of the scorching heat, torrential rains, or bitter cold. It looked impressive, but felt truly dreadful. An interesting, perhaps less known, detail is that during prolonged periods of extreme cold, guards would sometimes resort to secretly placing heated stones or small wrapped bundles of hot ash from braziers in the guard posts inside their uniforms, tucked against their bodies, just to stave off frostbite. This was highly unofficial and dangerous, as it carried the risk of burns or being caught with unauthorized items, but the misery of the cold could drive them to such desperate measures. Imagine the constant worry of being discovered with your makeshift heater, while simultaneously trying to stay alert and avoid freezing to death. It paints a vivid picture of their desperation. Historians still debate the extent to which the constant exposure to extreme weather, exacerbated by inadequate uniforms, contributed to chronic health issues among Joseon palace guards. Did the prevalence of respiratory illnesses, joint pain, and skin conditions directly correlate with their daily environmental challenges? Some scholars argue that the human body adapted over time, and that overall mortality rates were more influenced by diet and sanitation. Others contend that such sustained physical stress inevitably led to long-term debilitation, shortening lifespans and reducing overall quality of life for these individuals. The precise impact of environmental factors on their health remains a nuanced area of academic discussion. The misery of the uniform and the weather is compounded by the lack of proper shelter during your shifts. While there might be small guard posts or rudimentary lean-tos, they offer minimal protection from the worst of the elements. They are often unheated in winter, drafty in summer, and barely enough to keep you fully dry during a downpour. You can't simply abandon your post to seek comfort. Your duty is absolute. So, you endure, shivering, sweating, and silently cursing the heavens, while maintaining the outward composure of an unyielding guardian. This constant battle against the elements, fought in an uncomfortable uniform, teaches you a grim form of resilience. You become intimately familiar with every ache, every shiver, every bead of sweat. Your body learns to function even when screaming for relief. But this resilience comes at a cost, a perpetual state of physical discomfort that gnaws at your spirit, making every day a test of endurance. You are a human barometer, feeling every shift in the wind, every drop of rain, and every fluctuation in temperature, and suffering through them all. A silent, miserable sentinel against the unpredictable wrath of nature. Your duties as a king's guard extend far beyond the immediate confines of the palace. You're not just a static ornament by a doorway. Your responsibilities frequently take you beyond the grand gates, plunging you into the bustling, sometimes chaotic, world of Hanyang and its surrounding areas. This broader patrol brings a new set of challenges, from dealing with unruly citizens to facing unexpected dangers that lurk in the city's shadows. When you step outside the palace walls, you carry the heavy weight of the king's authority, yet you are also exposed to the common populace. Your patrols might take you through the vibrant, crowded marketplace, where the scents of street food, human sweat, and various goods mingle in a dizzying array. Here, you must maintain vigilance not against assassins, but against petty thieves, drunken brawls, and the general disorder that can erupt in a densely packed urban environment. Your imposing uniform and weapon are meant to deter, but they also make you a visible target for disgruntled citizens or those with little respect for authority. You learn to navigate crowds with an air of detached alertness, your eyes scanning, your ears listening, always ready to intervene if order is threatened. Your responsibilities also include guarding official processions, the king's movements outside the palace, the journeys of high-ranking officials, or ceremonial parades. These are spectacles of grandeur for the common people. But for you, They are nerve-wracking exercises in crowd control and security. You march alongside palanquins or horses, maintaining strict formation, your eyes constantly sweeping the faces in the crowd. Any sudden movement, any loud shout, could be a sign of danger. The sheer pressure of ensuring the king's safety in an open, unpredictable environment is immense. You feel the collective gaze of thousands of citizens upon you, each one a potential threat or a distraction. The slow pace of these processions, coupled with the heavy uniform, turns each one into an agonizing test of endurance. Dealing with unruly citizens is a common, and often unpleasant, part of your job. Joseon society had its share of discontent, poverty, and occasional rebellions. You might be called upon to break up public disturbances, quell minor riots, or apprehend individuals accused of petty crimes. These encounters are rarely clean or easy. You face verbal abuse, physical resistance, and the moral ambiguity of enforcing strict laws on desperate people. There's no room for personal sympathy. Your duty is to uphold the law and maintain order, often with a heavy hand. You learn to act swiftly and decisively, suppressing your own feelings of discomfort or empathy. Beyond the immediate city, your duties might involve patrolling the outer limits of the capital, or even escorting important dispatches or prisoners along isolated roads. These excursions expose you to different dangers: bandits lurking in the forests, wild animals, or even rogue soldiers. The relative quiet of these rural patrols is a stark contrast to the city's noise, but it's a quiet pregnant with unseen threats. You learn to read the landscape, to detect subtle signs of danger, and to rely on your instincts in unfamiliar territory. The constant threat of ambush or unforeseen peril keeps your senses on high alert, even when the path seems clear. One common misconception about the Joseon King's Guard is that their duty was exclusively within the palace walls. While palace security was paramount, many units, especially those responsible for general security and escort duties, regularly operated outside the immediate royal compounds, extending the reach of royal authority into the capital city and its surrounding areas. This meant a significantly more diverse and often more dangerous set of challenges than simply standing guard by a door. An interesting, and often overlooked, detail is the specific psychological training, or rather, conditioning that some guards received to desensitize them to the sight of suffering or death. Given their duties might involve quelling riots or dealing with the aftermath of violent incidents, guards needed to remain stoic and functional. This could involve being made to observe punishments or executions without flinching, or being forced to stand guard over the bodies of criminals. It was a brutal way to ensure they would not be emotionally compromised by the grim realities of their role. Imagine being forced to witness such scenes, not with any personal connection, but with the explicit instruction to suppress all human reaction, all while maintaining perfect composure. Historians still debate the extent to which the constant exposure to the city's underbelly and its various dangers impacted the guards' sense of duty and loyalty. Did witnessing the poverty and desperation outside the palace walls, coupled with their own meager conditions, ever breed resentment or sympathy for the common people, potentially conflicting with their unwavering loyalty to the king? Some scholars argue that their training and indoctrination were strong enough to maintain absolute allegiance. Others suggest that such exposure might have led to internal conflicts or a quiet disillusionment that rarely surfaced. The nuanced psychological effects of this dual existence, within the opulent palace and among the suffering populace, remain a complex area of academic discussion. The weather, as always, is an unyielding opponent. Whether you're marching through knee-deep snow on a winter escort or enduring the oppressive humidity of a summer downpour during a city patrol, your uniform remains inadequate, your discomfort constant. The physical toll is immense. Your feet ache from endless walking, your shoulders burn from the weight of your gear, and your mind is perpetually tired from the relentless vigilance. Beyond the grand gates, the illusion of safety within the palace is shattered. You realize that danger isn't confined to hidden plots within royal chambers. It exists in the open, on the streets, in the wild spaces beyond the city? Your life as a guard is a constant tightrope walk between maintaining order and protecting yourself, between enforcing the king's will and surviving the unpredictable chaos of the Joseon world. It's a thankless, often miserable existence, where duty is paramount and personal well-being is a distant afterthought. Even within the seemingly impregnable walls of the palace, your life as a king's guard is far from secure. You are not merely a protector, you are a pawn, caught in the intricate, often deadly, politics of protection. Here, loyalty isn't a given, it's a precarious tightrope walk, where a single misstep can mean not just demotion, but utter ruin. Or worse, you quickly learn that the palace is a viper's nest of intrigue and factions. The king, the queen, the various concubines, the powerful eunuchs, the scholarly officials, the military commanders. Each holds their own sway, each has their own agenda, and each is constantly vying for greater influence. As a guard, you are privy to hushed whispers, furtive glances, and subtle shifts in alliances. Your job is to observe, to report, but never, ever to comment or get involved. The wrong word, even an innocent observation, can align you with a losing side, sealing your fate without you even knowing it. Your loyalty is constantly under scrutiny, not just by your direct superiors, but by the myriad eyes within the palace. A casual conversation with a fellow guard, a perceived lingering glance at a high-ranking official, or even just appearing too friendly with someone out of favor could be misinterpreted. You live in a state of perpetual self-censorship, constantly monitoring your words, your expressions, and your movements. This psychological burden is immense, turning every interaction into a potential minefield. You become adept at keeping your thoughts to yourself, maintaining a neutral, unreadable facade, a walking monument to discretion. The concept of accountability is absolute and terrifying. If anything goes wrong within your area of responsibility, a misplaced item, an unauthorized person, a flicker of a candle where none should be, the blame falls squarely on you. There's no room for excuses, no concept of mitigating circumstances. The king's safety, and by extension, the stability of the realm, is paramount. Failure to uphold that standard, even in the most minor way, is seen as a profound dereliction of duty, an unforgivable breach of trust. Punishments for perceived disloyalty or incompetence are swift and brutal. It might start with a severe lashing, leaving your back a mess of welts and blood. Then, perhaps, a demotion, stripping you of your meager status and consigning you to even more unpleasant duties, for graver offenses, or even just being a convenient scapegoat in a larger political power struggle. You could face exile, imprisonment, or even execution. The stories of guards disappearing, or being publicly punished, are whispered warnings, reinforcing the constant fear that hangs over your head like a drawn sword. One common misconception about the Joseon Palace guards is that their biggest threat came from external invaders or assassins from outside the palace. In reality, a significant portion of their most intense vigilance and the greatest danger to their own lives often came from internal palace politics and factionalism. Guards could be easily caught in the crossfire of power struggles between different royal family members, powerful officials, or court ladies. Being perceived as aligned with the losing side, even passively, could lead to swift and brutal purges, making the palace a highly volatile and treacherous environment for those whose primary duty was to maintain order. An interesting, often overlooked detail is the highly specific and often bizarre superstitions and omens that guards were expected to be aware of and report to higher authorities. Beyond direct threats, any unusual natural phenomenon, strange animal behavior within the palace grounds, Or even peculiar dreams experienced by guards themselves might be interpreted as omens related to the king's health or the fate of the nation. Imagine standing guard, hyper alert not just for physical threats, but also for a flock of birds behaving strangely, or a sudden gust of wind. Knowing that misinterpreting or failing to report such a seemingly minor event could be construed as a failure of vigilance and bring down severe consequences. It added a layer of constant, almost paranoid, observation to their already stressful duties. Historians still debate the extent to which the Joseon kings actively encouraged or subtly manipulated this atmosphere of fear and constant scrutiny among their guards. Was it a deliberate strategy to ensure absolute loyalty and efficiency, or was it a natural outcome of a highly centralized, absolute monarchy? Some scholars argue that maintaining such intense fear was counterproductive, potentially leading to widespread resentment and even passive resistance among the lower ranks. Others contend that it was a necessary evil, given the frequent internal power struggles and the ever-present threat of usurpation. The ethical implications and practical effectiveness of managing loyalty through pervasive fear remain a complex subject of academic discussion. You learn to read the subtle shifts in the palace atmosphere: a sudden quietness, a hurried movement of officials, a change in the king's routine. These are cues, signaling potential political tremors that could affect your own standing. You become a master of the unsaid, interpreting meaning from glances, silences, and the absence of certain individuals. This sharpens your observational skills to an extreme degree, but it also means your mind is never truly at rest, constantly analyzing, constantly fearing what might come next. Your life becomes an endless balancing act, trying to be perfectly dutiful without being seen as overly ambitious, perfectly loyal without being seen as a tool for one faction, and perfectly vigilant without appearing paranoid. The lines are constantly shifting, and the stakes are impossibly high. You are a silent, miserable witness to the grandeur and the brutal underbelly of power, a shield for a king whose very existence demands a relentless sacrifice of your own peace, safety, and individual will. The politics of protection are a game you cannot win. Only survive, day by agonizing day. The very air you breathe within the palace seems to carry the scent of deprivation, a stark contrast to the occasional wafts of rich food from the king's kitchens. Your living conditions as a king's guard are a constant, gnawing misery, a world of food, filth, and flimsy shelters, where every basic comfort is a luxury you cannot afford. Your meals are a monotonous exercise in bland sustenance. Day after day, it's the same routine bowls of coarse millet or barley, perhaps a handful of pickled vegetables, and occasionally, if you're lucky, a sliver of dried fish or salted meat. Fresh fruit, sweet desserts, or a variety of dishes are unheard of luxuries. The food is often cold, prepared in bulk, and consumed quickly in a communal setting, devoid of pleasure or conversation. You eat to survive, not to enjoy. Hunger becomes a familiar companion, a dull ache in your stomach that you learn to ignore, transforming it from a craving into a mere background sensation. This meager diet, while providing just enough calories to keep you functioning, often leaves you feeling perpetually unsatisfied and, at times, genuinely weak from lack of proper nutrients. The concept of hygiene is rudimentary at best. Access to clean water for bathing is limited, and private washing facilities are non-existent. You, along with dozens of other guards, share basic communal latrines that are rarely cleaned with any diligence, emanating a constant, unpleasant odor. The lack of proper sanitation means that illnesses spread rapidly through the guard barracks. A cough from one guard quickly becomes a chorus of hacking. A skin rash can spread like wildfire, festering in the humid summers and chafing in the harsh winters. You constantly battle fleas and lice, tiny invaders that add another layer of persistent itching and discomfort to your already miserable existence. Your sleeping quarters are far from luxurious. You likely share a cramped bunkhouse or barracks with many other guards, packed tightly together on hard wooden platforms or thin, straw mats. There are no soft mattresses, no privacy, and certainly no warmth in winter or ventilation in summer. The air is often stale, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, sweat, and damp uniforms. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful and interrupted by the snores of your comrades, the constant coming and going of guards on shift change, and the persistent chill or oppressive heat that permeates the flimsy walls. Rest is a fleeting necessity, not a rejuvenating experience. The palace itself, while grand in its public facade, often hides areas of neglect and disrepair, especially in the peripheral areas where guards are stationed. Your posts might be in drafty corridors, crumbling outbuildings, or exposed courtyards where leaky roofs and broken windows are common. These flimsy shelters offer minimal protection from the elements, leaving you vulnerable to the biting winds of winter, the torrential rains of monsoon season, and the sweltering heat of summer. There's little escape from the relentless discomfort, even when you're technically indoors. One widely known fact is that despite the opulence of the royal court, the lower ranks of the Joseon military, including many palace guards, lived lives of considerable hardship. Their living conditions, diet, and pay were often barely sufficient, reflecting their low status within the rigid social hierarchy. The contrast between the grandeur they protected and the squalor they endured was a daily, painful reality, emphasizing their position as disposable servants of the crown. An interesting, perhaps less known, detail about the guards' living conditions was the lack of personal storage or possessions. Guards were often allowed very few personal items, and any belongings they did have had to be kept in a small, shared locker or simply bundled with their bedding. This meant a complete absence of privacy and personal space, constantly reinforcing the idea that they owned nothing, not even their own meager belongings. Imagine not having a single personal item to call truly your own. No small trinket from home, no book to read, just the bare necessities of survival. It contributed to a profound sense of dehumanization, blurring the lines between you and your fellow equally miserable guards. Historians still debate the extent to which these harsh living conditions were a deliberate policy to maintain discipline and prevent corruption, or if they were simply a reflection of the overall economic realities and social hierarchy of Joseon. Did the authorities believe that keeping guards in a state of discomfort made them more vigilant and less susceptible to external temptations? Or was it merely a consequence of the vast resources being channeled towards the royal family and high officials, leaving little for the lower ranks? The justification for such persistent misery among those guarding the king remains a complex and often debated topic among scholars. The persistent discomfort of your living conditions becomes a constant, low-level irritation, gnawing at your patience and your spirit. It's a backdrop to every duty, every shift, every moment of your waking and sleeping life. You learn to steel yourself against it, to find small pockets of mental escape. But the physical reality is inescapable. The lack of proper rest, the poor diet, and the constant exposure to unhygienic conditions mean that your body is rarely, if ever, truly healthy or comfortable. You live in a perpetual state of fatigue and subtle pain, a silent testament to the daily misery of serving the Joseon king. This unending physical burden chips away at your resolve, making the prospect of even a single moment of genuine comfort feel like an unattainable dream. You exist in a state of perpetual tension, your entire being coiled in readiness, for you live directly under the shadow of the king. Every moment of your life as a guard is dictated by his presence, his whims, and the terrifying knowledge that a single, almost imperceptible mistake on your part can lead to utter ruin. Not just for you, but potentially for your family back home. The king is the absolute center of the Joseon universe, and by extension, your universe, his daily schedule, his moods, his health. All these unseen forces subtly, yet profoundly, impact your duties. A restless night for the king might mean an intensified night patrol for you, with extra scrutiny and harsher punishments for any perceived lapse. A sudden change in his routine can throw the entire palace security into chaos, requiring immediate adaptation and even longer, more strenuous shifts. You are a silent observer of his life, a constant, unseen presence. Yet your own life is completely subservient to his. You are acutely aware that the king's eyes, or more accurately, the eyes of those closest to him, are always upon you. The palace is filled with eunuchs, court ladies, and high officials who serve as his personal network of informers. A slight slump in your posture, a momentary lapse in vigilance, a whispered word to a comrade. Any of these could be reported, embellished, and presented to the king or his advisors as a sign of disloyalty or incompetence. This constant scrutiny creates an atmosphere of pervasive paranoia. You learn to maintain a perfect, unreadable facade, your face a mask of solemn duty, your thoughts hidden deep within. The king's whims are the most terrifying aspect. An unexpected command, a sudden desire for a particular ceremony at an unusual hour, or a spontaneous decision to visit a remote part of the palace at night. These are not inconveniences. They are immediate, absolute orders that you must execute flawlessly, regardless of how exhausted or ill-prepared you may be. There is no questioning, no hesitation. The king's word is law, and your life depends on your swift and perfect obedience. His personal preferences, however minor, can translate into grueling, unexpected demands on your time and energy. The concept of losing favor is a sword hanging over your head. If, through some unfortunate incident or malicious report, you displease the king, the consequences are catastrophic. It might start with a public shaming, forcing you to kneel for hours in the palace square, bearing the humiliation. Then could come the dreaded order of a demotion, stripping you of your uniform and sending you to perform menial labor in some remote corner of the palace. Or worse, to the outer fringes of the kingdom, far from your family, your career, your status, your meager livelihood. All can be instantly wiped away by a single decree. For grave mistakes, or if you are deemed a threat, the consequences are even more dire. The possibility of imprisonment and torture is real, often aimed at extracting confessions or identifying co-conspirators. The ultimate fear is the death penalty, not just for yourself, but potentially for your entire family, under the doctrine of guilt by association. This collective punishment served as an extremely potent deterrent, ensuring that every guard understood the immense personal stakes involved in their duty. The fear for your family's well-being adds another layer of profound misery to your already burdened existence. One common misconception is that Joseon kings were isolated figures, rarely interacting with their guards. While direct personal interaction might have been rare, the king's presence was deeply felt through his constant demands for security, his stringent expectations, and the highly centralized system of reporting that ensured even minor infractions were brought to the attention of his inner circle. This created a pervasive, almost palpable sense of the king's omnipresence. An interesting, and particularly harrowing, detail of a guard's life under the king's shadow was the duty of observation for omens. Beyond regular security, guards were sometimes explicitly instructed to watch for and report any unusual natural phenomena, strange clouds, the behavior of birds or animals, peculiar sounds, or even unusual dreams experienced by other palace residents. These were interpreted as potential omens or portents related to the king's destiny or the realm's future. Imagine standing guard, not just for human threats, but also constantly scanning the heavens and the natural world for signs that might indicate bad fortune for the king. Knowing that failing to spot or report a relevant omen could be seen as a catastrophic failure of your duty, leading to severe punishment, it added a layer of superstitious anxiety to an already stressful job. Historians still debate the psychological effectiveness of this highly centralized, fear-based system of control over the king's guard. Did the constant threat of severe punishment truly foster loyalty and vigilance? Or did it primarily breed resentment, paranoia, and a system where guards prioritized self-preservation over genuine dedication? Some scholars argue that it was a brutal but necessary mechanism for maintaining absolute power in a volatile political landscape. Others contend that such pervasive fear could lead to a less efficient, more robotic, and ultimately less reliable security force. The nuanced interplay between fear, loyalty, and practical effectiveness in this system remains a complex area of academic discussion. You learn to suppress every flicker of personal emotion, every stray thought, every hint of individuality. You are an extension of the king's will, a silent, unwavering protector, a human barrier between him and the countless dangers, both real and imagined, that constantly swirl around the palace. Your life is a continuous performance, a grueling charade of perfect duty, where the slightest deviation from your assigned role could spell disaster. This constant existential dread, this profound sense of living on the knife edge of royal favor, becomes the defining feature of your existence. Every dawn brings not a promise of a new day, but a renewed awareness of your precarious position under the all-encompassing shadow of the king. Your misery isn't just physical or social, it's a deep personal anxiety that gnaws at your soul, making true peace an unattainable dream. You are a disposable shield, serving a power that could, at any moment, crush you without a second thought. Beyond the daily grind and the constant fear of the king's shadow, a deeper, more chilling anxiety permeates your existence as a Joseon king's guard, the vigilance against the unseen. Your most terrifying duty isn't just to fend off external threats, but to anticipate and neutralize assassination plots, rebellions, and betrayals that fester from within the very palace walls you protect. The palace, despite its outward grandeur, is a hotbed of conspiracy, whispers of factions vying for power, rumors of discontent among marginalized nobles, and the ever-present threat of a disloyal official or even a resentful royal family member. These are the true dangers you are trained to detect. Your role extends beyond physical protection. You are a living sensor, constantly scanning for subtle cues, a nervous glance, an unusual meeting, a shift in routine that might betray a hidden plot. Every servant, every eunuch, even other guards, could be a potential conspirator. Or worse, an unwitting pawn in a larger scheme. This pervasive atmosphere of suspicion means you trust no one, and you are trusted by no one. Your ears become finely tuned instruments, straining to catch hushed conversations behind screens, the particular cadence of a nervous laugh, or the sudden absence of a familiar sound. Your eyes learn to see through polite smiles, to detect the flicker of deceit in a gaze, or the telltale tension in a person's posture. This constant state of heightened awareness is utterly exhausting. Your mind never truly rests, forever sifting through sensory input, searching for the anomaly. The pattern that suggests treason is brewing. The threat isn't a visible enemy. It's an insidious poison that could manifest anywhere, at any time. The most terrifying prospect is an assassination attempt on the king. While rare, the thought is a constant, cold dread. You drill relentlessly for such scenarios: how to form a human shield, how to identify the attacker in chaos, how to evacuate the king to safety. But in the moment, you know it would be pure pandemonium. The sheer weight of that responsibility, the fate of the realm resting on your ability to react instantly and perfectly, is almost unbearable. Every shadow seems to hide a dagger, every unexpected sound a signal for attack. You are a human wall, but a very fragile one, against a threat that often comes from the very people who ostensibly serve the king. Rebellions from within are another terrifying possibility. While full-scale revolts are rare within the palace itself, minor mutinies or attempts by disgruntled factions to seize control are not. You are trained to identify signs of unrest among the lower ranks of palace staff or even among other military units stationed nearby. Discontent can simmer silently for weeks or months, only to erupt violently, turning your comrades into enemies and the familiar palace grounds into a battleground. Your loyalty is absolute, but you live with the terrifying knowledge that even those you share your miserable barracks with could one day turn against you. One common misconception is that internal palace conspiracies were primarily about grand political coups. While those certainly happened, many of the day-to-day internal threats that guards had to worry about were far more subtle poisoning attempts via food or drink, planting incriminating evidence, or even psychological manipulation of the king by opposing factions. Guards were often trained to visually inspect food and beverages before they reached the king, and to be extremely wary of any unfamiliar objects or persons near royal quarters. This added a constant, silent tension to their duties, making every meal and every object near the king a potential vector for attack. An interesting, and particularly chilling, less known detail is the practice of shadowing or discreetly monitoring specific individuals within the palace deemed suspicious by higher authorities, including other high-ranking officials or even members of the royal family. Imagine being assigned to follow a seemingly innocuous court lady or an aging eunuch, observing their every move, their every meeting, and their every conversation, without ever letting them know they were being watched. This covert surveillance was incredibly high stakes. Being discovered meant severe punishment, but failing to report a crucial piece of intelligence could mean the downfall of the king. It transformed guards into silent, unseen spies within their own workplace, adding an immense layer of psychological burden and moral ambiguity to their duties. Historians still debate the true frequency and severity of internal plots within the Joseon palace. While historical records detail significant power struggles, it's difficult to ascertain how many unseen threats were genuinely neutralized by the guards' vigilance versus how many were merely perceived anxieties within a highly paranoid system. Did the constant fear of internal conspiracy make the guard force more effective? Or did it foster an environment of distrust and over-reporting that was ultimately inefficient? The line between genuine threat and the product of widespread suspicion remains a complex and fascinating area of academic discussion. The psychological toll of this constant, internalized vigilance is immense. You develop a form of chronic, low-level paranoia, always on guard, always second-guessing. Sleep offers little respite, as your mind continues to process potential threats, even in dreams. You become a master of disguise, blending into the background, appearing harmless, all while your senses are acutely aware of every ripple in the palace's seemingly calm surface. This vigilance against the unseen makes your life a perpetual tightrope walk. You are not just guarding a king, you are guarding against the very human frailties of greed, ambition, and resentment that fester beneath the surface of courtly life. Your misery is compounded by the knowledge that the greatest dangers often come from the places least expected, turning your daily duty into a silent, terrifying battle against ghosts and shadows. As a king's guard, you are a silent, miserable witness to the very apex of Joseon society, an observer of staggering opulence that stands in brutal contrast to your own meager existence. You are present for feasts, famines, and false comforts, living a life of stark deprivation while guarding a king and court awash in luxury. A paradox that sharpens the edge of your own suffering. You stand at your post, a human statue, as the aromas of elaborate feasts waft from the royal kitchens and banqueting halls. You might catch glimpses of tables laden with mountains of steamed rice, glistening cuts of meat, exotic fruits imported from distant lands, and delicate pastries, the clinking of porcelain and silver, the joyful murmur of courtiers, the laughter of the king. These sounds of indulgence filter out to your cold, empty stomach. Meanwhile, your own meal consists of the usual bland barley, eaten quickly and silently. The contrast is a dull ache, a constant reminder of the vast chasm between your life and theirs. You are close enough to smell the extravagance, to hear the revelry, but forbidden from partaking in any of it. Ironically, your duty continues even through periods of famine that might grip the kingdom. While the common people starve, their bellies aching and their children crying from hunger, the palace must maintain its facade of plenty to uphold the king's authority. This means the royal kitchens continue to churn out lavish meals, perhaps slightly scaled back, but still far beyond anything the populace could dream of. You witness the king's concern for his people, expressed through decrees and rituals, but you also see the unwavering reality of the court's continued consumption. This disconnect is a bitter pill, highlighting the stark inequalities you are sworn to protect. Your stomach might rumble in solidarity with the starving masses, but your duty compels you to stand firm, to protect the very system that creates such disparity. The false comforts of the palace are all around you, yet utterly unattainable. You see officials in thick, padded robes, eunuchs with soft, silk slippers, and court ladies adorned with precious jewels and intricate hairstyles. You hear the rustle of expensive fabrics, the faint scent of perfumes, the murmur of polite, unhurried conversation. They walk on polished wooden floors, sleep on warm, luxurious bedding, and live in rooms heated by underfloor heating on Dole during the bitter winters. Meanwhile, you endure drafty barracks, a thin mat, and a coarse uniform that offers little protection. The comfort is an illusion for you, a tantalizing mirage you can see but never touch, sharpening the cold edge of your own discomfort. You also witness the king's immense power and authority, which manifest not just in decrees, but in the sheer spectacle of his presence. You stand guard as he meets foreign dignitaries, issues pronouncements, or presides over grand ceremonies. You see the fear and reverence in the eyes of even the highest officials. This absolute power, while the source of your misery, is also the source of the order you maintain. It's a complex, contradictory reality. You are both a victim of this power and its indispensable enforcer. One well-known fact is that the Joseon royal court maintained an elaborate and luxurious lifestyle, even during times of hardship for the general population. This was not merely indulgence, but also a deliberate strategy to project the king's absolute authority and divine mandate, demonstrating the stability and prosperity of the realm regardless of external conditions. The visible opulence of the court was a crucial part of the Joseon state's self-presentation. An interesting, perhaps less commonly known, detail is that during very important royal banquets or ceremonies, some lower-ranking guards stationed close to the event might be given small, leftover scraps of food that were deemed too unpalatable or too insignificant for the royal table. This wasn't a generous act, but a practical way to dispose of excess and perhaps offer a minimal, non-disruptive reward. Imagine the psychological impact of being given food that the most pampered members of the court considered waste. Yet for you, it was a rare, perhaps even delicious, treat. It underscored your low status while simultaneously offering a fleeting, miserable form of comfort. Historians still debate the extent to which the Joseon King's Guard, witnessing such extreme disparities daily, developed a sense of cynicism or resentment towards the monarchy they protected. Did the constant exposure to royal extravagance, especially during times of famine, erode their genuine loyalty? Or did their rigid training and indoctrination keep their sense of duty intact? Some scholars argue that while individual guards might have felt personal resentment, the overall system of strict discipline and the fear of severe punishment prevented any widespread disloyalty. Others contend that such conditions likely fostered a quiet, underlying bitterness that rarely manifested openly. The internal psychological landscape of these guards remains a complex and intriguing area of academic discussion. The sight of the king's favored pets, pampered and well-fed, sometimes stirs a bitter, fleeting thought within you. Even these animals, you note, live a life of greater comfort and security than you do. It's a fleeting moment of dark humor, quickly suppressed, for such thoughts are dangerous. Your place is not to question, but to protect. This constant, daily exposure to overwhelming opulence, juxtaposed against your own grinding misery, becomes a subtle form of torture. It sharpens your awareness of your own humble station, reinforces the vast inequalities of the world, and grinds away at any remnants of personal ambition or hope. You are a shadow guarding light, a testament to hardship existing in the very heart of luxury, forever bound to protect a world that offers you nothing but the cold, hard reality of your duty. Your life as a king's guard in Joseon is an endless watch, a perpetual vigil that stretches on, day after grueling day, with the chilling realization that there is little chance of advancement and the constant, nagging threat of a miserable end. You are trapped, a cog in a vast, indifferent machine, destined for a life of thankless service. The concept of a career path, as you might understand it, is largely absent. For the vast majority of guards, promotion is a rare, almost mythical event. reserved for those with powerful connections, exceptional luck, or who distinguish themselves in a genuine moment of crisis which, thankfully for the king, is infrequent. You will likely spend your entire working life in the same low-ranking position, performing the same monotonous, dangerous duties. The dream of rising through the ranks, of gaining a position of influence or respect, slowly withers under the relentless weight of reality. You are, and will remain, a simple guard, a disposable shield. This lack of advancement means that your financial situation remains perpetually precarious. Your meager pay is barely enough to sustain yourself, let alone send substantial remittances to your family in the countryside. You live hand to mouth, constantly worrying about the next meal, the next harsh winter, or any unexpected expense that could plunge you into deeper debt. The palace offers no security beyond your immediate employment. There are no pensions, no benefits, no safety net for old age or infirmity. You are a resource to be used, and then discarded. The constant threat of a miserable end looms large. It's not just the direct danger of assassination attempts or rebellions. It's the more insidious, slow erosion of your well-being. The brutal weather, the inadequate diet, the relentless physical strain, and the pervasive lack of hygiene all conspire to undermine your health. Chronic illnesses, joint pain, respiratory ailments, and lingering injuries become common companions as you age. Your body, once strong and resilient, slowly breaks down, worn away by years of relentless duty and deprivation. Beyond physical decline, the threat of being purged or becoming a scapegoat remains ever present. A change in the king's favor, a shift in palace politics, a perceived error on your part. Any of these can lead to a sudden, catastrophic end to your service. You could be dismissed without cause, leaving you destitute and without prospects. You could be imprisoned on false charges, tortured, or even summarily executed to satisfy a political agenda. Your life is not your own, and its ending is not within your control. It rests entirely on the volatile whims of a distant monarch and his advisors. One universal historical fact is that within highly stratified societies like Joseon, upward mobility for those in lower military or service roles was extremely limited. Guards were typically drawn from the lower social classes, and their position, while offering a semblance of stability, rarely provided a path to significant improvement in status or wealth. Their life was often one of dedicated, yet unrewarded, service. An interesting, yet morbid, detail is the potential for a Joseon King's Guard to be deployed to the frontier or into actual combat zones as a form of extreme punishment or a desperate measure during wartime. Effectively, a death sentence. If a guard committed a serious infraction, fell out of favor, or was simply deemed expendable, they might be forcibly transferred from palace duty to the more dangerous and less prestigious frontier garrisons, or directly into a military conflict. Imagine the despair of knowing your comfortable, relatively speaking palace misery could be replaced by the direct, brutal reality of battle or lonely, dangerous outpost duty with almost no chance of survival. It was a terrifying specter hanging over their heads. Historians still debate the psychological impact of this pervasive sense of hopelessness and lack of future prospects on the average Joseon King's Guard. Did it lead to widespread apathy and disengagement, or did it foster a grim determination to simply survive each day? Some scholars argue that the rigid social structure instilled a fatalistic acceptance of one's lot, while others suggest that such conditions would inevitably breed quiet resentment and a feeling of being utterly exploited by the system they protected. The long-term mental resilience required to endure a life with so little hope for improvement remains a complex and somber subject of academic discussion. The passage of time does not bring ease. It brings only more of the same. The cold winters feel colder, the hot summers hotter, the long shifts longer. Your body grows weary, your spirit heavy. You watch new, young recruits arrive, their faces still filled with the same naive hope you once possessed, and a bitter, knowing weariness settles over you. You are a ghost of your former self, a living testament to the crushing reality of your chosen path. Your career as a King's Guard is not a journey with a destination. It's an endless, circular patrol, a perpetual vigil that grinds you down, day by agonizing day. The hope you once carried has faded, replaced by a grim acceptance of your fate. You are a nameless defender of a powerful realm, living a life of profound misery, destined to fade away, leaving behind only the cold, hard silence of the palace walls.